Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2. Today I'm going to go over a very in-depth endgame guide for you guys so you know exactly what to do once you reach level 60. What is the best way to spend your time? What's the most efficient way to actually increase your player power? What are the best things to do to increase your player power, etc. Diablo 4's endgame has not really ever been as fleshed out as it is right now. Personally, I think the game is by far and away better than it ever really has been. There's a ton of different activities in the game, and there's many different reasons to do each activity based on what you need at that current time, which I think is exactly what I've been wanting in this game. There's quite a lot of variety, and today I just want to explain to you guys exactly how everything works so you guys know how to approach the endgame and to just blast up in difficulty and to make your character as strong as humanly possible. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just get right into it. I have a little written guide here which is going to kind of help lead you guys, but also help lead me so I don't go on too many tangents. There's just so much to talk about, so please do bear with me. It'll be a little hard to keep this concise, but everything will be timestamped. Alright, you reached level 60. Now what do? You have 5 million endgame activities unlocked. Where are you supposed to go? What are you supposed to do? The first thing I would recommend doing real quick is to just pull up an endgame build guide so you know what you're looking out for in terms of uniques, stats on gear, etc. A great place to go for builds is Mobalytics. They have a fantastic tier list here, which is going to be constantly being updated. So regardless of what class you're playing, you can kind of see what the meta is real quick. Pick a build for you. So for example, if I wanted to play Quill Volley, I could click on my Quill Volley build guide, which I will have linked down in the description, and I made a video on as well. So if you're playing Spiritborn, highly recommend checking these out. You can see I even posted an endgame build yesterday. Already it's been literally a day, and I'm hitting for 2.5 billion as you can see in this clip, so feel free to check that out. And if you decide to roll a new character, I have leveling builds for Sorcerer, Rogue, Necromancer, and Spiritborn, so feel free to check that out. Now that you have a build guide popped open on your other monitor, finish the Deeds of a Champion questline. If you have finished the, what's it called? The Nahantu campaign, you'll then gain access to the Deeds of a Champion questline. Doing this will sort of unlock some of, there's like prerequisites for some of the endgame activities in order to actually fully unlock them. So I'd recommend just doing this, just knocking it out of the way. It'll give you some extra gear, some XP, and some cosmetics. You don't have to do it if you don't really want to do it in a certain order, which the questline is going to force you to do. But they put this in the game for a reason, kind of just to show you, to guide you through the endgame. So I would just recommend doing it. After you do the Deeds of a Champion questline, real quickly just finish up your Nahantu Renown. This is just homework that you have to do that I neglected to do, but doing the Renown is pretty good because it will give you some skill points, some Paragon points, as well as doing the Tenets of Akarat is going to give you some flat stats that I'm currently missing on my character. Just give you some dex, strength, int, willpower, whatever. It's just some homework that you'll get done real quick. Won't take you that long. Once you finish your homework and you finish the Deeds of a Champion questline, the last step of Deeds of a Champion is to do Pit 20, which will then unlock Torment 1. Now that you are in Torment, this is kind of where the end game starts, and your goal, at least for the short term, is to climb the Torment Tiers. Each Torment Tier is unlocked by doing higher tiers of the pit. So Torment 1 is 20, Torment 2 I believe is 35 or 40 or something, Torment 3 is 50 or 55, and Torment 4 is 65. It'll just show you right here. I have it unlocked already, so I can't see, but it'll just show you right here. In order to do the higher tiers of the pit, your character is going to need to be really damn strong. Torment 4 is insanely hard compared to how the game used to be. It's genuinely difficult. You need a very good build to actually do well in Torment 4. Talk about how to get there real quick, but the reason that you care about being in Torment 4 or even progressing at all is each Torment difficulty is going to increase how much XP you get from mobs and also the amount of loot that drops. The reason you care about XP is because grinding your Paragon level takes some time, and grinding your Paragon board is very good for player power. It makes you significantly stronger, and also getting more loot is why we play the game, right? We want more loot. Also, per Torment difficulty is going to increase how many items drop when you kill Tormented Bosses, and also the chance at Uber Uniques. Uber Uniques are very rare. I'll have a separate video posted on them tomorrow, but you care about farming certain uniques as well. So when you farm bosses, ideally you want to do it in at least Torment 3. You almost never want to farm bosses in Torment 1 because each difficulty is going to increase how many items they drop. So Torment 4, it drops to 5 to 6 items, and then based on the difficulty, just subtract 1, right? A technicality I want to mention is that your ultimate endgame goal is actually to push into the pit as high as possible because it is the only way that you can max out your glyphs. Real quickly, you'll see that I have a glyph here that is level 46, and this can go all the way up to level 100, and the power of it is basically going to be gated behind how high of a pit tier you can do. And the legendary bonus you can see is a multiplicative bonus, and that bonus will go up based on the level of the glyph. So technically, like, this isn't a crazy amount of power, but from a technical standpoint, if you want to make your character 100% perfect, it's going to be able to need to do 100 pit 100. But for most intents and purposes, for most people, your goal is going to be getting into Torment 4. So how can we get into Torment 4? What is the best way to get there? There isn't a step-by-step guide. It's kind of just increasing your player power and knowing how to do that. You want to be as efficient as possible, so let's kind of talk about what you need to do in order to do that. The most important thing is to kind of understand your character and what your goals are at any given moment, and understanding also what activities you need to do in order to reach that goal. So you need to figure out what the thing is you need to do, what the thing is that you need, plus what is the thing that is going to get you that as fast as possible. That's kind of obvious, right? So I'll just give you a little example here. The reason that I explain it in this way is because there's a lot of different stuff that you need, and there's a lot of different ways to achieve it, but there are ways that are most efficient, and there are also multiple goals you'll find yourself having at the same time. You'll find that you'll need to shelf one goal in order to focus on another one, but then it's like, okay, what can I do that is the most efficient to kind of achieve both of these things simultaneously? So I've got a little priority list here, and let's kind of explain how it goes, and this is also what I followed upon reaching level 60. So the first thing that I did is I knew I need my build defining unique. My build defining unique is Rod of Capellique as well as Ring of the Midnight Sun. So the first thing that I did is I tried to gamble for uniques. You can gamble for uniques at the Purveyor of Curiosities in most towns, and you can do that with obols. You have a pretty good chance of getting uniques upon gambling. You could also spend your seasonal blessings here, and with the Urn of Curiosities, you have a chance of getting additional items when you go and gamble. I went into Torment difficulty with about 500 obols. I gambled a little bit, and I got lucky enough to get a rod. If I didn't get a rod, though, what would I have done? I either would have went and farmed more obols, or I would have went and farmed bosses that would have dropped these uniques. A quick little resource that is very helpful is that there is a cheat sheet here that Maxwell has that'll show you what loot drops from what boss. So if I needed the rod really, really badly, like this is a disgusting power increase, I need this immediately before I can kind of start playing the game, I want to go kill Duriel, or Andariel is who drops it. Next, I want Ring of the Midnight Sun. So that is second priority for me. So I went and killed, it's midnight. I just had Ring of the, there's a lot of Ring of those. Dropped from Gregor. So I went and got some Living Steel because I really needed my Ring of the Midnight Sun, and then I went and killed Gregor a few times and got my ring. Otherwise, I could have just farmed more obols and gambled them. But then you might ask, how would you get more obols? And I'll just quickly give an example of how you'd want to kind of use the sheet that I have here. I wrote down a resource cheat sheet, and I also wrote down what each activity does. As you can see here, I have obols. You get them from pit or nightmare dungeons. That's the best way to get them. So I could go farm the pit, and I could see that my second priority is to fill up my Paragon board, and that happens to work pretty nicely or with my need for obols, because the pit is going to give me very good XP, which is what I need to level up my Paragon, and it is also the only way to level up my glyphs. So I could kind of shelve my need for the unique and decide, okay, I'm going to go do the pit. That's going to give me some XP, which I need anyways, and I'm going to get some obols, so then I could gamble for my items. Or I could decide that I need to farm for boss materials, and I have written all here what is the best way to get boss materials, boss mats, tribute of harmony, blah 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 blah. You can kind of see where this is going, so I'm going to explain real quick why you care about each of these individual things, and then I'll go over each individual activity so you kind of understand what you want to do. So like I said, first off, build defining uniques. This depends on your character if these uniques are actually build defining or not. Rod of Capellique is a massive damage increase for me, but Rakanoth's Wake is not really all that big of a deal. That determination you'll have to make out yourself. Next, Paragon board. This is probably the second biggest player power that you can get, is to just get a lot of Paragon levels, because the legendary nodes in here are very good. This is a 30% damage increase. This is a 33% damage increase. This is a 30% damage increase. And also you get all these little stats along the way. You need like a lot of resistances in order to go into the higher tiers of the pit. A lot of armor, max HP. Paragon board is really good. Also, leveling up glyphs in here is a ton of extra damage as well. This gives me, by itself, well over 20% multiplicative damage increase. That's one of the biggest things that you can do for yourself early on, is try to just get like 100 levels in the Paragon board to fill it out a little bit, get some of these nodes early on, and then level up some of your glyphs. Next to that is just getting some good gear. I mean, this could also be top priority. It really just depends. But it's a gear game, right? So we care about getting good gear. and putting good aspects on those and then upgrading that gear via Masterworking. Masterworking is a thing that they added a couple seasons ago if you haven't played. Basically, you need Obducite in order to masterwork, and I'll explain how to get Obducite in a second. And you also need a lot of other materials. As you can see, I'll just masterwork this weapon here. So when I masterwork it, it's going to increase the affixes by 5%. As you can see, it costs actually my camera's in the way. It costs a crap load of materials. That's because it's nearly maxed out. A normal item, let's see, do I have one that isn't maxed? I'll just throw this in there. If it's not maxed, it doesn't cost nearly as many materials, but it still is going to cost quite a lot. As you can see, there's a lot of materials down here. Upgrading this is going to increase its stats by 5%. So ideally, you don't really want to be masterworking gear unless it is particularly good, usually in Ancestral. And masterworking is very powerful because it increases the stats by 5% per, but also every 4th upgrade is going to increase a random stat. As you can see that this one is full blue here. I'll juice up this ring actually because this is pretty good just to show you guys. So if I go up each time, it's going to increase the stats by 5%, which is pretty good. And then on the 4th increment of the upgrade, it is going to increase one affix randomly by 25%. So as you can see, it went to basic skill damage. Not a favorable outcome here. And then you could also just end up resetting this, which would then cost you 5 million gold and some materials. Masterworking is pretty much reserved for once you actually have good gear to masterwork, which is going to be like Ancestral gear with, good stats on it. Next to that is getting runes. You could decide to get these early on as well. Runes are pretty powerful. You only need 4 of them, but they can be pretty rare. This one gives me 20% max HP. This one gives me Earthen Bulwark, and there's a lot of them that just give you extra damage. They're not super insane for your gear or for your player power, but they can be pretty good. Next to that, Uber Uniques are very good, but they're also difficult to get, so I would not really put them high on the scale. There's not very much here, but there's a million different ways that you can go about achieving all of these, so let's get into that. Activities. First off, we got Nightmare Dungeons. Nightmare Dungeons is an extremely efficient Obducite farm, and again, that is the main material that we need in order to masterwork our gear. So Nightmare Dungeons is a pretty good way to do that. They're relatively low difficulty compared to other stuff, so it's pretty brain dead Obducite farm. If you have a super fast build like the Evade Spam build, it is potentially the fastest Obducite farm in the game, and it also gives you a lot of Angel Breath. Angel Breath is needed to craft stuff at the Alchemist, such as elixirs, incenses, which can be pretty powerful, and you'll also need it, I think, when upgrading certain stuff, so you will run out, and it can be kind of a pain in the ass. So Nightmare Dungeons is a great way to get Angel Breath. It's also the best way to get new glyphs. If you just reach max level and you don't have any glyphs, the best way to go get some is probably just sit in Nightmare Dungeons for a little bit, and you'll most likely earn the majority of the glyphs that you don't have access to. It's also going to drop obols if for some reason you care about that, you want to gamble some uniques. Next activity, the Pit. The Pit is the only way to increase your Torment difficulty. So doing higher tiers of it is going to have those little breakpoints to increase your Torment difficulty like I mentioned before. It is the second best way to get XP in the game, and we care about XP for our Paragon levels. It is also the only way to level up our glyphs. So doing the Pit is going to be a place that you're going to be in a lot because leveling up our glyphs is a ton of extra power, and it is also really good for loot. It's probably the second best loot farm in the game, potentially even the first, depending on how fast you're farming it. You'll probably want to farm the Pit at a tier where you can clear it in about 2 to 3 minutes. You don't want to be doing tiers of the Pit where it takes you 10 minutes to clear because that just straight up isn't efficient. If you're in the Pit, you're most likely there to get XP as well as level up your glyphs at the same time, and you just happen to get loot as well. So you want to do tiers of the Pit that you can slam out really quickly, which is the most efficient for leveling up your glyphs. Next, we have Infernal Hordes. Infernal Hordes is it's kind of a jack of all trades right now, but it is simply the best XP in the game. If you only care about reaching like a Paragon board breakpoint or something like that, you want to be doing Infernal Hordes. Next to that, it is very good for Obducite. It's probably not as fast as Nightmare Dungeons for Obducite. I'd say Nightmare Dungeons is a little bit faster, but it is still very good for crafting materials. It also has a box in there that gives you a pretty decent amount of loot. It's like guaranteed to have at least 1 or 2 greater affix ancestral items. So pretty decent for loot, but it can take a while. It's harder, and it has a bit of RNG with how much stuff you'll actually get from there. But when you open the material chest that gives Obducite, it also gives a ton of gem materials. So if you need to craft some better gems, which actually is crazy expensive. I don't know if you guys have seen this. I have only been able to make one of these. It costs 10 million gold and a lot of Forgotten Souls in order to make this, as well as the gem materials. I guess I don't have enough Forgotten Souls. It costs 30 Forgotten Souls and 100,000 gem fragments. So if you're trying to min-max your character fully, you're going to need those gem crafting mats. There's also a box in there that is gold, and if you spend all of your mats, you'll get a decent amount of gold. It's probably the best gold farm in the game, but it's not very good. It's like, I don't know, gold is kind of hard to come by right now. Next to that, there are just some specific uniques in there, such as Shard of Varathiel that only drop from Infernal Hordes, so if you need that for your build, that's where you'd go get that. Next is Tormented Bosses. Bosses, already talked about how you can get the mats, but I'll talk about a little bit more in a second. Bosses is how you can farm certain uniques. They also drop runes almost every kill, so it's good for getting runes as well. And it is a good way to get Uber/Mythic uniques. The drop rate on the Uber/Mythic uniques is quite low. I'm going to make a separate video on these. I killed maybe 400 bosses and I've only looted 2 Uber uniques thus far. But that is how you get those. Also, every kill seems to give you about 400,000 gold. So if you kill 100 bosses, you get like 40 million gold. So that's pretty good as well. It only drops uniques nowadays, so unless you need uniques from that boss or you need runes, it's kind of a waste of time unless you're just trying to gamble a mythic unique, but there's more efficient ways to get mythic uniques. Next is the Undercity. The Undercity is very confusing for most people, and it is actually one of the single best things in the game, but only if you utilize it properly. First off, you will have a little quest line to unlock the Undercity. Unless you do this quest line, you will not get tributes. Tributes are basically these little things here that before you enter the Undercity, I'll just go to the Undercity real quick. Here we go. Tributes are things that determine what you actually get from the Undercity. So Tribute of the Titans, you can see that completing this will give you, with at least attunement rank 1, will reward random boss summoning materials. So I'll just show you a little clip here. Killed the boss, and then I ended up getting a pretty decent amount of boss mats from using this, and also this gave it to everybody in the party. So this means that the Undercity with this tribute on is the single best way to get boss materials by far, because you're sharing all of these mats with 4 people. Everybody's getting this many mats. So the question then becomes, how do you get this tribute? There's also multiple other tributes, so I'll quickly explain what the other tributes are. The other ones are Obducite. It's very, very good for materials. Probably the single best way to farm Obducite if you have this, but it's very rare. Runes, single best way to farm for runes is doing the Undercity with the tribute for that. You can also target farm certain ancestral items, and there's also this cool little thing where once you put a tribute in here, there's a tribute that's like legendary tier, and it gives you a guaranteed ancestral. It's not very good, but it's decent because you can target farm certain items. You can actually put in here like pick for core stats, pick for primary resource, etc. And there's these little crappy ones. These ones aren't as good, but like Tribute of Pride. Okay, I guess you barely have any options. If you have the ancestral one, it lets you pick. You can pick like an amulet that has a passive stat on it, or a piece of gear that has a core stat on it, etc. And kind of like determine the type of item that you want. It's not very consistent, but it is at least something, right? I just want to emphasize that doing these is extremely busted because you share all of it with 4 people, and the amount of materials that you get, the amount of boss mats or runes or masterworking materials is extremely insane. So how do you actually get these tributes? I have it written down here. It seems to be kind of random. It's just random when you get them, what you're doing. They drop from almost anything in the game, but I think the most efficient way to get them is by doing the pit. It seems like higher tier pit is going to drop more tributes. Next to that, Infernal Horde seems to drop a pretty good amount of them, but it's only at the end, and probably Tormented Bosses. I'd actually put Tormented Bosses over Infernal Hordes because Tormented Bosses, it's maybe one every like, I don't know, 10 kills or something, you'll get a Flask of the Titans, or a Flask of the Titans. That is a strength flask from classic World of Warcraft. A Tribute of the Titans, that seems to drop the most from actually killing Tormented Bosses. But these other ones, like, it kind of just depends on what you're doing. The game doesn't really tell you. They drop from almost anything. They drop from Blood Maiden, they drop from Pit, Nightmare Dungeons, blah, blah, blah. So it seems to me the best way to get them is the Pit. But let me know down in the comments if you have any more anecdotal experience with that. But that is my experience. Using these is very good. I would recommend almost always doing them in a group. Next activity, we have Helltide. Helltide is probably the second best raw loot farm in the game. It just gives a lot of loot. If you're going out of your way to open up certain boxes, you can kind of target farm items that you need. So for example, if all of your gear is really good, but you really need gloves, you can go in Helltide, open up the boxes that give you gloves, and you'll get like 4 or 5 pairs of gloves. Killing the Blood Maiden seems to give a pretty good amount of materials, and it just drops a pretty good amount of loot as well if you happen to have the materials to spawn the Blood Maiden. You also get a lot of Forgotten Souls there. It's pretty much the only good way to get Forgotten Souls, which we found out that I need a lot of these apparently to craft my gems, and it also is needed for masterworking your gear too. So if you ever find yourself low on Forgotten Souls, Helltide is what you're going to want to go do. Next, we got some more miscellaneous things. So we got Tree of Whispers. They just drop random materials, gear, some gold. I wouldn't ever go out of your way to do the Tree of Whispers. I'll just roll a clip here. It seems decent. Like, the mats just keep flowing like Rawhide and Iron Chunk, but I don't care that much about that stuff. I think I got a tribute from it, so nice. But it also gives like a few million gold, but I wouldn't go out of your way to farm Grim Favor unless you need a couple million gold like right in that moment. Next, I just wrote down Obols for some reason. Just use it to gamble for uniques or certain legendary aspects that you need. And then Realmwalkers. Realmwalker is the new seasonal activity. It's just on the map. You guys have probably already done it, so I don't need to explain what it is. It seems pretty terrible for anything. It seems like the only reason you do it, I don't have one on me, but it's for the purple opal. The purple opal is good because then when you just kill random mobs, you will just get boss materials. So I would pretty much never play the game without the purple opal on if you are in need of boss materials. And I would just always go do those if you need to re-up on that. The only other reason I would do Realmwalker is actually for the seasonal journey here, which I need to move this up here. It's for the seasonal journey. The seasonal journey upon first time completion, and you can only do it one time, so I don't need to say that, is it gives you a lot of boss mats. Doing the last 2 tiers gives you actually a disgusting amount of boss mats and a decent amount of normal mats as well. But you can see champion summoning cache, and then I think there's another summoning cache here. Yeah, summoning materials. Also, you need to finish the season journey in order to get a Resplendent Spark, which is needed to craft Uber Unique, so I would recommend doing it. And this will kind of just have you do all sorts of different endgame activities, but some of the things in here are to kill stuff in Realmwalkers, some of them are just kill random bosses, blah, blah, blah. So I wouldn't like focus on the seasonal journey. You kind of just get it done while playing anyways, but it is helpful along the way. And if you really need boss materials, you could go out of your way to try to complete some of those. Do that at your own leisure. I would not go out of your way. It's not a huge priority at all. Those are kind of all of the endgame activities, what they are used for, why you care about them. Let's quickly talk about, it's kind of like a recap, but it's a little bit of a resource cheat sheet here. And it's kind of just a priority of what is the best way to get certain things. So Obducite already mentioned the best single way to get this is with Tribute of Refinement in the Undercity. And then next to that is probably Nightmare Dungeons, and then next to that is Infernal Hordes. Infernal Hordes can technically be better if you get very, very lucky, but I think for most people, Nightmare Dungeons will just be more efficient. But Infernal Hordes also drops more loot than Nightmare Dungeons does, and it is good for, I was going to say it's good for something else, but it isn't. It's just good for getting loot in addition to Obducite. So, it's the best XP farm in the game. Nightmare Dungeons, not that great for XP. So if you want to farm Obducite, I would probably pick Tribute of Refinement first, and then Infernal Hordes, but if you need Angel Breath, then you go do Nightmare Dungeons. This is why it is helpful to have this little list here, right? Because you need to know what is the best thing for each thing, and it depends on what you need at that time, right? It's annoying, but it's also like really, really good. It's just hard to explain. Angel Breath, like I just said, Nightmare Dungeons or Helltide or Grim. It might drop from Grim Favors. I don't know. Forgotten Souls, by far and away, Helltide. It says you get it from Infernal Hordes. I think that might be made up, or I might be stupid. Let me know in the comments. I haven't seen any other way to get them, so I would just do Helltide. Gem Fragments, no clue other than Infernal Hordes. Opening the material chest in there gives you infinite amounts of these. Scattered Prisms, I assume they just drop from Infernal Hordes. It says they do on Tooltip. You shouldn't ever need these. Runes, Tribute of Harmony or Boss Kills. Tribute of Harmony is disgustingly insane for this. Otherwise, just killing bosses gives you a rune pretty much every kill. Obols, Pit or Nightmare Dungeons, they give about the same amount at the same frequency. Maybe Pit is slightly faster. Gold, Infernal Hordes or Tree of Whispers probably. It's pretty hard. Killing bosses, if you have infinite boss mats, might be slightly more efficient because you get like 400k per boss kill on Torment 4 at least. But the best way to get gold is just by trading. I mean, you kind of have to. If you have a good rod of Capella-K, you could sell it for 100 million gold, whereas it would take you a little bit of time to farm that. So just trade if you want gold. Boss mats, Tribute of Harmony in a group, by far just unbelievably insane. Even solo, best way to get boss mats. Otherwise, the Seething Opal of boss mats is pretty good. There's like, technically you can get boss mats from doing almost anything in the game. If you just play the game, you'll kind of passively get boss mats, but you can't go out of your way to pick, I want this boss mat, other than Living Seal, I think. Everything else is kind of just play the game. Just play with the Seething Opal on at literally all times. Or just do the seasonal journey at least one time. And then tributes, like I said, I think Pit is number 1, and then Tormented Bosses drops the Titans one, and then I'll just put that in parentheses here, Titans. And then Infernal Horde seems to drop them pretty regularly. I need to test this one a little bit more, so I will add on to this, and I'll leave this in the description in a crappy little basement. Hopefully you found that helpful. I will update the written guide if anything changes or if I have made some discoveries, but I hope that this helped you out, just kind of get an idea of, okay, how can I best increase my player power? What are the things that I need to do that? And what is the most efficient way to do that? Hope you found it helpful, and I will see you guys later. Peace.